Can landlords decide that they don't want to rent to Section 8? In other words, can you turn down a resident just because they're a Section 8 candidate? The answer may surprise you. Let's go ahead and take a deep dive into what Section 8 is and what your options are as a landlord. Let's get started. Before we get any further, let's talk about what Section 8 is. This is the Housing Choice Voucher Program. It's a federal program that's administered by local housing authorities to help low-income families afford private market rental housing. All right, how the program typically works is that the tenant pays a portion, typically a smaller portion. The government pays the remainder. There is an initial inspection that the property has to pass to qualify for the program, and then every year on renewal the property is again inspected so that the lease can be renewed. For landlords, Section 8 actually works out to be a guaranteed rent partner, because for a lot of landlords they're really happy about the fact that they don't have to worry about where the majority of the rental payment is going to be coming from. Section 8 in some cases may pay the entire rent. A more common arrangement is that they pay the majority of the rent, and there's a portion that's calculated and attributed to the tenant as their contribution to pay to live in the space. The question becomes, can you refuse to rent to a Section 8 tenant? That's a question that many landlords ask when we start having conversations about Section 8 and what that means. Under federal law, we have a fair housing rules and regulations, and we all know, or we should all know, that you can't refuse to rent to someone on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity, family status, or a disability. So those are the standard protected categories that we cannot use as a basis for depriving or denying someone housing. A housing voucher, as you can clearly tell, is not one of those categories. So while the housing voucher is not a category at the federal level, what we found is that many states and local municipalities have ordinances in place that prohibit source of income discrimination, which is what not renting to someone because they're on Section 8 would be considered a source of income discrimination. Many states and many municipalities have legislation that makes that illegal to do. That is the immediate answer. But let's take a deeper dive and look at what source of income distribution actually is. Source of income discrimination includes housing choice vouchers, which we know is Section 8, but it also includes a variety of different types of payments. For example, if your state or your local municipality outlines that source of income discrimination is illegal, then anyone who's receiving disability payments, Social Security, any type of veterans benefits, and any type of government rental assistance, as well as alimony or divorce fees, income from a divorce settlement, all of those categories would be considered source of income discrimination. So if you had a policy as a landlord that says, I'm not renting to anyone who is receiving disability payments to cover their rent, that would be considered source of income discrimination. And again, depending on where you are, possibly at the state or the local municipal level, that would be considered illegal. You would be committing a crime, because source of income discrimination in many places are illegal. Just for the record, I'm in Broward County. Broward and Dade both have legislation that prohibits source of income discrimination. So that is something that if you're in South Florida, you are probably going to want to pay close attention to. But based on common knowledge, or based on my knowledge as of current times, this is 2026, that type of discrimination, not renting to Section 8 or any of the other categories that we discussed, would be considered illegal. So this, as you can see from the map, there are several states that have legislation in place. So this is just to kind of give you an overview of the places where at the state level, this is not allowed. Where is voucher refusal illegal? And what you can see from the map on the slide is that there are several states that in the entire statewide, there is legislation that protects source of income so that you can't discriminate based on source of income. In Florida, where I'm located, you can see that as a state, we don't have any legislation statewide, but there are pockets. You can see down in the South Florida area, there are pockets, and as I said earlier, from Dade and Broward for sure, they do have ordinances on the books. I think Tampa also has something, and Orange County up by Orlando as well. These are all places that have local ordinances. So wherever you are, it's important for you to check your state and county and city, because sometimes it might not be county specific, it may be city specific before you're making any rental decisions, and especially important before you come up with what your policy is going to be, because the way that this will be brought to light is someone will call to ask, will you accept Section 8, and you'll either say yes or no, and you want to make sure that you're not doing something that's illegal, you're not committing source of income discrimination. Okay, I just want to make sure that we're aware of that responsibility, but I also want to make it clear that there are things that you can still do. So just because a tenant is on, or a potential tenant is on Section 8 does not mean that you have to accept them. You can still do a full screening, and that's what I recommend as a property manager. That's what we do. Despite the fact that the tenant is on Section 8, we still do a full screening. We look at credit history. We look at rental history. We call landlords to verify what their experience was. We do a criminal background check, and we look at income requirements to make sure that based on the income that they have, they will be able to meet their obligation, their portion of the rent will be able to be paid based on the income that they have. So really important. A lot of times landlords say, okay, since the government's paying the majority of the rent or all of the rent, they don't do the screening. They don't do a thorough screening. I recommend always screening your tenant, because you want to make sure that the person that you're putting in is a solid candidate who is not only going to pay the rent, but is going to take care of the property and report any concerns or any repairs to you in a timely manner so you can resolve them sooner versus later. Now, a lot of landlords are just super hesitant about taking Section 8, and they are really concerned about the inspection part of the process. They don't want to do the inspections. And I would say that we have had many landlords who have really appreciated the benefit of having a Section 8 tenant. There are some things that we know automatically are going to be viewed in a Section 8 inspection. The windows have to have screens on them. If the windows don't have screens, that's typically something that gets flagged. The point is that you can get a list of all of the things or the main things that Section 8 is looking for. If you have a quality property that is in good habitable shape, everything works, you're maintaining that property, you really shouldn't have to worry about the Section 8 inspection, because the Section 8 inspector is not coming out to see if you have top of the line anything. They just want to make sure that the program is helping to provide clean, habitable, decent housing for the person that they're putting in there. So if you're a good landlord and you're keeping a quality property and not a slumlord, the Section 8 inspection really should not be something that you need to worry about. Some landlords are concerned about the paperwork and the annual recertification. Again, once you do the paperwork once, submit it, it's pretty standard. And again, the inspection, the annual inspection for recertification is not an issue if you're taking care of the property. Initially on setup, there may be a delay, and that sometimes is concerning to some landlords. What we've seen is if you start the paperwork far enough in advance, then typically within the first few weeks of the person being in the property, you start receiving the payments. And once they start, unless there's something that goes awry, the payments will show up as expected on time without any issue. And then another concern that some landlords have is that they think that there are caps. They set the payment standards that may be below market. I'm not sure what market that is an issue in, but in our market for a while, the Section 8 payments were actually a little bit higher than the market rate. And so a lot of our landlords were happy to accept a Section 8 tenant because the value that they had set as the rent for the property was even a little bit above what the landlord had previously been getting. I think a lot of that has normalized where the Section 8 amount is either in line or maybe slightly above where the market is. But in our market in the Dade-Broward area, I really haven't seen a big discrepancy between what the market rent is and what Section 8 is offering. So why should you consider Section 8? If you think about it, there are 2.3 million voucher holders throughout the United States, and one thing that you can be sure of is that the government's portion is going to arrive. So that it provides a certain level of certainty and surety around collecting the rent. What we found typically happens is when everybody gets along, the tenants typically stay longer because it's a hassle to move from property to property. So the tenants typically will stay. So you have a tenant for a longer period of time. They typically don't want to lose their voucher, so they'll pay their portion and then the government's piece is coming. So the Section 8 program, many of our landlords have found that it has really helped them create a low vacancy, long-term tenant environment that has been very profitable for them. So that's something to keep in consideration. So how do you stay compliant and protected? What do you need to know? The first thing to know is know the rules. Know the rules at the federal, state, local, and city level so that you are not inadvertently violating any of the laws that are on the books as it relates to what your practice is. A big recommendation of mine is for you to screen consistently. There cannot be one set of screening criteria for Section 8 tenants and then another set of criteria for everybody else. Whatever the criteria is, it needs to be comprehensive. It needs to be universally applied so everyone who is applying or expresses interest has a similar, if not identical, experience based on the processes that you have in place. A really good general rule is to document everything. If there were conversations that were had, if there were documents that were provided, just make sure that you document everything so that at the end of the day, if you do decide that you're not going to go with the tenant, you have valid reasons to show that this had nothing to do with the Section 8 voucher. This had to do with conditions, bad credit, a terrible landlord reference, whatever the criteria is, but make sure that you document everything. And then again, maintain the standard. Even if you're not going Section 8, good properties attract good tenants, right? Good tenants want to be in places that are well cared for and well managed. So if you want to improve the quality of your tenant pool or your tenant prospects, it's really important to make sure that you're providing a quality product on the rental market so that you will attract the type of tenant that you're looking for. Good properties attract good tenants. Bad properties attract bad tenants. You want to do everything in your power to make sure that your property is attracting the best quality tenant for you. The bottom line is you may not be able to refuse a tenant based on Section 8, their Section 8 status. And to be honest, that really shouldn't be a basis for refusing a tenant, but you can still screen them. So the takeaway from this is that the program is not designed to force you to tolerate bad tenants in your property. The process is designed to provide an opportunity for tenants to live in decent housing. So if you do your screening, the Section 8 aspect of the process should be nominal. It should not be that big of a deal, because at the end of the day, if you're doing what you're supposed to do to get a quality tenant, maintaining the property, doing adequate screening, the person that you're going to bring into your property, into the process, the fact that the government is paying a portion of their rent will be incidental to the choice that is being made. That will give you as a landlord a little bit more stability. Hopefully it will be a situation where the person will stay longer, because every time we have turnover, every time a tenant leaves, that triggers expenses for the landlord in terms of bringing the property back up to speed, as well as vacancies. So the longer the tenant stays, the better for you as the landlord. All of this works nicely in the Section 8 environment if you are doing what you're supposed to do. Really important to make sure that you are aware. Knowledge is your protection. You don't want to be in a situation where you are inadvertently violating the rules because you don't know what they are. Because as we all know, ignorance of the law is no excuse. If you'd like to schedule a complimentary phone consultation today to talk about how you can work through the Section 8 program, or have a specific question as it relates to Section 8 and your property, please visit my website at simplyaskSharon.com to schedule a complimentary phone consultation. I hope that you found this video helpful. If you did, please remember to like it, and also please subscribe to my channel so that you can be notified when new videos are posted. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.